Quite possibly one of the most hilarious things that I've seen is reviewers go out there and play Fire Emblem Engage and think that fans, when it comes to Fire Emblem, are going to be so upset that it doesn't have this or that social feature, only to see a huge sleuth, a huge wash of people storm the Twitter seas and in other parts saying, oh, wait a minute. There's no social features like Three Houses. It's not as in-depth. It's just about combat. Cool, sign me up, no problem. That's the reason why the game was scored lower. Man, there's no issue there. Honestly, this is hilarious, and I completely understand. When I did my review roundup and I went over the different reviews for Fire Emblem Engage, there were people that were like, wait a minute, that was the main reason? And yeah, that's pretty much the main reason for the lower scores. Now, there are some people who feel that the story isn't as good and the characters are forgettable. But if you go through Fire Emblem history, a lot of the characters are forgettable because there's a ton of characters out there and you'll find your characters that you like or dislike. But at the end of the day, the games are always about the superb combat in there. And Fire Emblem Engage is more of a throwback to what Fire Emblem used to be with a touch of the new or modern Fire Emblem and like the Somniel and some of the relationship stuff like the eating stuff and all of that. So I think that they tried to strike a little bit of a balance, but I think the base of the game was built off of it just being an incredible Fire Emblem gameplay experience and the same campy or cliched type of story that you would see normally, but with some twists and turns like Fire Emblem always has it. And we're not going to go over all the spoilers and stuff here, so don't worry about that. But the post that I wanted to talk about was from Eno, who is a champion Xenoblade Chronicles player. He holds speedrun records and he does all sorts of guides and everything. Very talented RPG gamer, and he put up a post on Twitter saying, man, seeing Three Houses hate posts is funny because I actually like it more than most Fire Emblem games and thought it was a vast improvement from Fates, and somehow people are celebrating that Engage isn't like it. I get social stuff in games sucks, but come on. And then he also says, I may be biased because I only ever beat Blue Lions and didn't care to replay the game for other routes. So it's interesting that he's saying that because yeah, there are a large number of classic Fire Emblem fans that have been upset with the modern games because they feel that it's too far from what the Fire Emblem games have done before. Now, for those who don't know, Fire Emblem did not start at Fire Emblem Awakening. I know everyone likes to just sit there and say that it did, but it really didn't. It started well before that, and people liked it well before Awakening. Awakening just saved the franchise because they were on a sales slump when it comes to Fire Emblem, and Awakening put enough new ideas with the right amount of marketing, the right characters to bring everything back, and the right system too with the Nintendo 3DS to resurrect strategy RPGs, the dual screen gameplay, all of that. It was just awesome. It was an awesome thing to see. But I do think that now at this point, now that Fire Emblem is in so many more places with Fire Emblem Awakening, Fates, also Three Houses, I do feel that Fire Emblem can try different things and also be something else. I don't feel that every single Fire Emblem game has to have social stuff, has to do what Three Houses does, has to have children like Awakening, has to do what Fates does, has to split paths. I just don't feel that they need to. Very similar, and I know this is not necessarily the same thing because it's two different franchises, but similar to how Shin Megami Tensei and Persona are. Shin Megami Tensei is the base first game. Persona was a spin-off from it. At first they were very similar, and then they started changing to where Persona would get all the social stuff and Shin Megami Tensei would be more of the demon straight up combat game. And that's kind of how it is still not at this point, even with SMT 5 compared to Persona 5. I don't need a bunch of social stuff in every single Shin Megami Tensei game. And I think that's how I feel with Fire Emblem. And I'm not opposed to the social stuff in Fire Emblem. And to see so many fans come out and saying, wait a minute, it doesn't have that, because they were kind of waiting to see how in depth it was, because there's still some social stuff in Fire Emblem Engage. It's just not as in depth and more of a focus like Fire Emblem Awakening and Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Three Houses was, which there were many Fire Emblem games like Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn and so on and so forth that do not have that heightened focus on the social elements and everything. I think it's hilarious that people are now kind of dancing on the grave of Fire Emblem Three Houses. And I say that metaphorically. I'm not saying that as it's actually that the game is still selling and everything like that. But people are just saying, wait a minute, this is the best one since the old school, since Path of Radiance, since whenever, because there's not all of that stuff, because you can't have super tea time with friends, and you're not sitting there going on dates and all this other stuff that they've tried to do before, and you're not sitting there and scrolling through walls of text forever to try to get certain support classes and these two people to talk over and over and get all of this. Now, I know that that probably leads to a lack of maybe understanding the characters more, or feeling that the characters don't do as much. And I can understand that. Once again, I completely understand for those who are looking for that, but I think that there's enough space, especially with this game, now that we learn more about it, and we're going to talk about like what this game and how it was developed. Now that we're learning more about it, it makes complete sense that they wanted to do this type of game and kind of have it more as a direct Fire Emblem traditional style of game. So I don't mind at all. I think that it's okay for people who liked Three Houses to sit there and say, oh, well, I don't like this as much because I feel like I need to be doing social stuff all day. If that's what enjoyment that you got out of the game, that's fine. But then again, I feel that the game shouldn't be punished just because it's not like Three Houses. Developers have the creative freedom, in my opinion, to create a different type of game if they want to. And I don't think social aspects and all that make Fire Emblem. I think that it's a nice little extra and benefit. And I'll be completely honest, by the second, third time that I played the game, I was kind of done with them, and I was really just trying to get to the battles. But I think that Engage not having it, especially for people who like to speed run or people who just like that pure experience and they just want to go through and really focus on that and not have to worry about all that, I think that Engage is going to be a great Fire Emblem game for them. And the people who played Three Houses and did enjoy the combat are going to enjoy Engage too. That doesn't mean that Fire Emblem Engage is the future of the franchise and they're never going to go back to whatever Three Houses did. It just means that this game doesn't have that, and I don't feel that it's a worse game or it needs it, otherwise it's bad or just can't live up to it. Like, I don't believe in all of that, because that type of standard isn't held for lots of franchises that do different things or try something else out. I kind of judge it based on what the game is itself, and based off of what I've been reading and based off of what I've been seeing, I think it's perfectly fine in terms of what they were trying to do for this story and this game. Just like it's perfectly fine that certain Fire Emblem games don't have children, for example. Fire Emblem Awakening has children. If you pair up people, children can come from the future, come back to the game, and you can use them. Well, every single game doesn't need to have that story twist or plot with the relationships and children. Like, it's just that game has it, and there's a couple other games, but that one does it. But not every game needs to have it, and all of a sudden it becomes a big controversy, or oh my gosh, it doesn't have that, right? No, it doesn't need to be that way. But those are just my thoughts when it comes to it, when it comes to what's going on with this crazy dilemma with Fire Emblem Engage that I think is both positive and negative at the same time. But it's interesting because we do have a bit more information with Fire Emblem Engage now that it's getting very close to launching. We're seeing sales numbers wise, or sales wise, I should say more like it, it's getting closer and closer to that top spot in lots of places. But in Japan, it's actually reached the top spot, not only on Amazon Japan with the physical sales, but also with the eShop numbers as well. Fire Emblem Engage is the #1 spot over games like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So once again, it's very good to see that Fire Emblem Engage is not only topping the Amazon bestsellers like we've discussed in previous videos, but it's also topping the eShop sales. So this should be a pretty solid launch for Fire Emblem Engage, and maybe even the biggest launch of all time in Fire Emblem history, at least at first. Now we still have to wait and see if it can top the huge amount that Fire Emblem Three Houses did with over 3.8 million lifetime sales. But for right now, based off of the COMG charts and what's that's tracking, based off of Amazon and also the eShop, this could be the largest Japanese launch for a Fire Emblem game ever. And worldwide, it could also be that way, as Fire Emblem Engage is slowly creeping up those eShop charts in the US and is also up on the #1 charts in Amazon in the US too. So it looks like things are going well quite a bit here. But another thing that I want to talk about with Fire Emblem Engage, and I find this to be interesting too, because I think that Intelligent Systems was like, you know, we're doing this, we got this. So for those who don't know, Fire Emblem Three Houses was developed in a kind of like try type of way. You have Koei Tecmo, they're using their Dynasty Warriors engine. You got Intelligent Systems, who's also helping a bit here and there. Then, of course, Nintendo kind of putting and managing everything together. And that resulted in quite a bit of delays. That resulted in graphics not necessarily there, but you needed the manpower. You needed so many people to be able to get it done because Fire Emblem Three Houses is a very unique and crazy game with all the different content that's in there. So I completely understand why they did that. But now that the game has been leaked, we're starting to hear a little bit more about this game. Now, with the online service that it's using, it's not using Nintendo's new NPLN servers. It's using the NEX servers, which is the old one, but the game doesn't really have extensive online features anyway. You can download some maps, you can kind of play online in that type of way. It's cool, but it's nothing expansive that would probably need the new NPLN. But it's using the NEX, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day when it comes down to Fire Emblem and what that game does for the online. But more interesting to me is that Oatmeal Dome, who is a hacker, leaker type of person, always looking into the files and stuff, he's actually talked about what engine Fire Emblem Engage is running on. And he says this: Fire Emblem Engage looks like the game has leaked onto the internet. It appears to be built using the Unity engine. Not what I was expecting. Modders will have lots of fun with this game. For reference, Three Houses was built using the Dynasty Warriors game engine. So it's very interesting because Unity is an open source engine. It is a free to use as well. So it's not an engine that you're going to have to pay royalties for, that you're going to have to pay like a chunk sum for. And then people have also looked through the credits at the end of the game because the game did leak and everything. And guess what? There is no Gust. That was one of the big rumors beforehand, especially because of the way that the game looked itself, that this game had graphics or had something done with Gust, which is from the Atelier series, and that is with Koei Tecmo. So Koei Tecmo and Gust, they were not involved with this game. This was an Intelligent Systems / Nintendo game, traditional, straight up. So that tells me a couple things. One, that's the reason why maybe a lot of this stuff was maybe removed when it comes to the relationship stuff and all of that. It would have just been too much when it comes to Intelligent Systems, or spent too much time when they were doing it by themselves in terms of writing and programming and all of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, they probably could when it comes down to it. They've done it before, but I think that they really probably just wanted to focus on the combat and focus on the game as a singular title that they're going to be doing. And I think that they also talked about that in an interview series on the official Nintendo.com page, where the producers and like the developers talked about how they really wanted to focus on a traditional Fire Emblem experience like we've seen before. So there's that. But also with using Unity, that's open source. Now remember, Intelligent Systems isn't owned by Nintendo, so obviously they have to give a cut to Nintendo, a pretty big cut, right? As Nintendo is the publisher and owner of the IP, but they don't have to split that with anybody else. They don't have to split the rest of it with Koei Tecmo or with Gust or with anybody else involved, because they're using that open source and it's their game that they developed by themselves with Nintendo. But Intelligent Systems was like, man, we're not sharing any of this bag with anybody else. We've done that with pretty much every single Fire Emblem game on the Nintendo Switch at this point, and we're not going to be doing it with Fire Emblem Engage, and this game's going to do well. So we absolutely want to keep most of that, because remember, they're not owned by Nintendo. So I just found that to be interesting in terms of the engine pick. They didn't go with Unreal Engine 4, they didn't go with something else from Nintendo internal. They went with Unity open source engine, and once again, you can use that and not have any issues in terms of royalties and fees. It's all you. So I think that that's what they were looking for, because obviously as a business they're looking to survive and continue on and make money, of course. So very interesting facts across the board here. But what's maybe even more interesting when it comes down to things is that Atelier Ryza 3 Alchemist of the End and the Secret Key has been delayed to March 23rd in Japan and March 24th worldwide. And there has been a lot of different theories and reasons why, outside of what the developers had to say why this game was delayed. So we're gonna go ahead and get into that. So publisher Koei Tecmo and developer Gust have delayed Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End, and the Secret Key from its previously planned February 22nd release date in Japan and February 24th release date worldwide to March 23rd in Japan and March 24th worldwide. It will be available for the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam. And in a statement, producer Junzo Osoi said that the additional time was needed to fine-tune the final touches to the game. So here is the full statement from the producer. We apologize for this delay to everyone who has been looking forward to the release of Atelier Ryza 3. In order to make the game a fitting finale for Ryza and her friends, we have taken on challenges such as adventuring in a vast open field and graphics that express the charm of these characters to the fullest extent. Our team will take this additional time to fine-tune the final touches so that we can deliver to all of you who have been following the series for the best possible experience with the accumulation of Ryza and her friends' adventures. We are making the game even better to make it worth your wait. So we appreciate your patience for just a little bit more until the game's release. Now, there are a number of, once again, theories that are floating around why they did this, and I kind of see it on both. I think it's a combination of those. So February 24th, the original release date when it comes down to the game, was a packed day/week. You had Kirby coming out that day, but then you also have Octopath Traveler 2. That is a game that is sold better than any of the Atelier franchise. And not only that, it's not just like it's like a Nintendo Switch exclusive, so you can kind of hang your hat on that. But this time, Octopath Traveler 2 is coming out to Nintendo Switch, to PC, to PS4, and PS5. So it has more of a footprint than it did when the original Octopath released. And once again, Octopath 1 has been critically acclaimed, over 3 million units sold. It's a bigger, smaller IP now at this point. And I think that Atelier Ryza just hasn't hit that level that Octopath has overall. And of course, Kirby is Kirby, and I think that Kirby's going to do well too. So if you have a few things that you need to fix up, or if the game isn't in its best state that it could get to be by the time that it releases, there is no reason why you shouldn't delay it to the next month where it releases in a much cleaner path for Nintendo Switch for sure, but also just when it comes to RPGs. Now, you are releasing it next to Resident Evil. It's pretty much the same time period, but Resident Evil 4, that's a different style of game. Obviously, that's going to be more of the Xbox and PlayStation. There is no Nintendo Switch version, so then you have a clean release for Nintendo Switch players if that's all you play, because you won't be playing Resident Evil 4 Remake on the Nintendo Switch, clearly. So it gives it a clean release window for that, and Ryza is probably going to sell best on the Nintendo Switch. So to me, it makes perfect sense that if they had some stuff that they had to fix up, get that fixed up, and also avoid Octopath 2 and Kirby as well. So makes sense to me, and I understand why they did this overall. Now, also, what's a cool thing overall is Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. The expansion shipments and digital sales, things have been going incredibly well for Capcom on that front. So total worldwide shipments and digital sales for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion have surpassed the 5 million units Capcom announced. Now, the expansion was last reported to have surpassed total shipments and digital sales of 4 million back in August 2022. So they're still racking up millions plus here. Now, the official Monster Hunter Twitter account shared the following artwork in commemoration of the new milestone. Very nice artwork, by the way. It says 5 million sold. Thank you, hunters. Now, the Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion launched for the Nintendo Switch and PC via Steam on June 30th worldwide. PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Windows PC versions are due out this spring. So the sales do not include the newer versions of the game since it's coming out this spring, and this is the previous with the PC and the Switch, with a lot of it being the Nintendo Switch version of the game. Monster Hunter has turned into a massive franchise at this point, and more power to them. Monster Hunter has been a game that they've been working on for decades to get popular in the West, and it finally popped off with multiple different Monster Hunter games, but especially with Monster Hunter World and bringing that to a bigger audience, and they were able to get that. And they followed it up with Monster Hunter Rise on the Nintendo Switch, so everything kind of fell into place for Capcom, and I'm happy that they stuck with Monster Hunter as long as they did. But we've got all sorts of RPG news and more content that I've already talked about before, so if you guys want to check out any of that. When it comes to Monster Hunter, when it comes to The Legend of Zelda, when it comes to Octopath 2 and various other games coming out this year on Nintendo Switch and other platforms as well. I've covered quite a bit on the RPG front and of course on the Fire Emblem Engage front. So I'll have links for you guys in the description if you want to know about the review scores or if you want to know about the game itself, beginner's guides. There's different things that I've already done on the channel and I will be doing, so make sure you stay tuned. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it, and we will see you for the next video. Peace.